Let's take a look at the fastest way to get through this ACT English question that focuses in on comma use. What we need to recognize here is our subject is Mount Rainier, and we have a passive verb, which makes it hard to see, coming way down here with is. Now, on the ACT, the test writers hate having anything between the subject and the verb because they don't consider it to be the most grammatically acceptable approach. So, this is their favorite way to test us on this. And what we need to recognize is anytime we have a word or a phrase coming in between that subject and that verb, we must comma sandwich that phrase, meaning we need to put a comma after our subject in front of the phrase and after our phrase in front of the verb. So this answer we're going to select as no change. So let's talk a little bit about commas in terms of how they are used on the ACT. I tell my students all the time that a comma has one number one job on the exam, and that is to separate ideas. So when we're looking here, we have to pay attention to where, if any, we want to stick in our commas. So we want to start by analyzing the different places that we have commas based upon what we see in our answer choices. So again, in answer choice A, I've got my commas around this phrase. In answer choice B, I've got a comma coming after Mount Rainier and in between an active volcano. Then we've got a comma after Washington State in C. So B and C are kind of splitting those commas that we have in A. And then D can also look super attractive because this glaciated peak is in Washington State. But what we have to remember when we're working on this is how these relate to each other and whether or not this is needed. So when I talk to my students about the comma sandwich is going to come through, let's get that spelling right. Comma sandwich is going to come through and it's going to separate out unnecessary information or description. So what I want to do to test whether or not this is being used correctly is I want to pretend for a moment that this orange phrase doesn't exist, and I want to see if my sentence still makes sense. Mount Rainier is the most glaciated peak in the contiguous United States and serves as a dramatic backdrop to the Seattle skyline. Great. So I don't need to know this part that it's active or it's a stratovolcano or it's in Washington State. All of that is helpful for me. But if I ignore that whole entire phrase, then I still have a complete idea. And that's how I recognize that while this description is nice, it's not necessary. So I'm going to go ahead and put those commas in on both ends. If we were to separate the phrase just the active stratovolcano, let's see what that looks like. Mount Rainier in Washington State is the most glaciated peak in the contiguous United States and serves as a dramatic backdrop for the Seattle skyline. So again, this can be really attractive, but it doesn't separate out all of our unnecessary information because the ACT would consider this to be redundant. And what we mean by that is we have to take a look at, hey, if we already know it's in Seattle, then we're recognizing that that means it's also in Washington State. It can't be in Seattle and not be in Washington State. So that is redundant. So we have to sneak in that Washington State in our unnecessary information as well. With B and C, they're not the right place for us to separate our ideas because we need to have that subject and that verb coming together as one idea. We cannot have a subject without a verb and have it be considered an idea. So we want to come through, and again, this is ACT's favorite way to test this question is sneaking it in directly between the subject and the verb. Take the whole entire phrase out, make sure that you still have a complete idea, and choose your comma sandwich.